Going. Yeah. Okay, we have some proposals for you today. I don't know if you guys brought anything.
We actually don't have any today for the first time in several weeks, so.
Okay,
We're
so
happy to listen to whatever you've got.
I will get this email sending out. But I do remember to bring, printed out copies today.
Oh, great, thank you.
Did you send an email?
I did just send it.
Okay. So sorry, I dissociated for a moment
Thank you.
and then realized I missed a sentence. What I'm without words.
Should have
I'm
separated
happy to
these.
take this whenever.
That's all right, we'll figure it out.
But I assume I'll present 4 and 7.
Thank you.
It's the Article 13.
I'll just pop it in.
There is. Okay. So Article 13, it's been a while since we've discussed this one, obviously. It's one that I think we've made clear is really important to us, but we're also at the point where, we're all the same thing. We've been doing this for a long time, and there's a lot of things that we could spend months and months arguing about on Article 13, but we think it's best to, focus on what we need to focus on. And so Article 13, there are 2 colors of changes here to try to hopefully simplify it. The green is language that's different from CCL, but it's what we've agreed to previously, in our previous proposal, and the blue is what we haven't agreed to before, but it's different from CCL.
Okay, thank you.
Hopefully make that a little bit easier. So, to start off with, at the very top, we just have the definitions of discrimination, in in a sort of general sense, and how that connects to university regulation and policy. So we, obviously, the university has its definition of discrimination. We're not conflicting that, but we think having a definition within the contract itself, is useful, and it helps for, not only for determining what discrimination is, but it's for people who might think they're facing discrimination to know, here's a definition as it applies if they're looking at this, sense. So it's not meant to provide, an extension beyond a lot of the definitions that already exist, just sort of connecting those 2 things so we can know them together. We have the list of protected classes, and we've gone back to CCL for that. That was a big change. As you remember, we had a lot of additional things added in there. And while we think those protections are vital for those different classes, we've opted to say, let's keep what we have for CCL, and let's talk about the other parts of this article and how they affect GAs. Moving down to line 26, we have this definition of sexual harassment and misconduct, just to point to the university regulation and policy, as well as state and federal laws. Again, it's not a huge change from, how this contract would work, but just making sure that they have those pointed to definitions in case they need them, as well as the definition of sexual misconduct as a form of sex discrimination, just to make sure we have those definitions in there. Moving on, the prohibited consensual relationships. We've agreed on the language, I believe, for all of that. It shouldn't be a change from previous things. The only thing we haven't agreed to is this line 71, which is just redefining an employee specifically for this subsection. Just because the way we have it worded, employee works for, this is connection between GAs and all other employees. Elsewhere in the contract,
Did you just see the chat?
yeah, is my screen now? I should have shared it. 1 second. Let me
Sorry,
read it.
it's showing 7.
It's showing 7.
Sorry,
Okay.
we had it up on the board. Thank you for saying something.
Sorry, yeah, thank you for saying something. Okay. Yeah, it's because I switched screens halfway through. Okay, so, so the way we've worded a lot of these is between GAs and other employees. Elsewhere in the contract, it defines employee as GA, just so we can use those interchangeably. So we're saying for this subsection specifically, employee includes people that aren't GAs, just so we make sure we're getting those connections proper. For going down to line 83 and 84, this is just medical confidentiality. We've agreed to the majority of this section. Just the add-in on the last half of that sentence we think is necessary to make sure that that statement is clear and concise. And I believe that's it. That's all of the sort of changes as they relate to that.
I'm gonna start at the end first, just about lines 83 and 84, I'm not a records expert. But I do believe there's a fair amount of directory level demographic information, which are relatively open source. I'm not sure, and again, I'll have to check with not only Shane, but probably folks in the records department. I don't know how effectively we can lock down some of that like directory level demographic information. It may not be reported on the individual person level, but do you see what I'm saying? Like, because there are some components and it's driven by public records law. Like, there are some things that we can't put behind a record of confidentiality that have nothing to do with FERPA necessarily. I'm just making that as a point. I don't have a specific example or a citation now. I'm just thinking that may be one limitation we may run into.
Yeah, and if, I'd love to know, and maybe if we have to reread this, we can. That's why we started this, in accordance with the requirements of HIPAA and
Gotcha.
FERPA to make sure, this is just saying, we're following those, which, we're not saying UF isn't, but, just, respecting that confidentiality as much as possible. And if there's a better way of wording that, we're open to changing that to see how that works out.
If we could go back up to, let's see, 27 through 29.
Yeah.
So if there's a conflict between these policies and this agreement, then the agreement shall govern unless otherwise superseded by state or federal law. I'm struggling to kind of understand. So is the intention of the statement that if there is daylight between the policy and the law, then it's not the policy, but the law that governs? If it does, I guess what I'm saying is because there's three things that are contemplated in the statement.
Yeah.
We've got policies, we've got the agreement, and then we've got law.
Mhm.
And it seems as if the intention is, and this is why I'm looking for clarification, it seems as if you are attempting to suggest, you're attempting to propose that if there is a difference between what the law requires and what the policy grants, then we're gonna go with the agreement unless the law causes us to have the policy. I'm just having, with those three things that are contemplated, I'm trying to understand the hierarchy that you're trying to put them in.
Yeah, so we're trying to say that obviously state and federal laws are what govern. If there's a state and federal law that conflicts with regulation, UF policy or with this contract, the law governs as it does.
Okay,
If there's a conflict between, if UF is interpreting that law and they're saying this is a regulation that we think fits it, but maybe the regulation goes a little bit beyond that, and that conflicts with the agreement supersedes the regulations in those cases. And only in the cases where there's a direct conflict between the regulation and the policies. That is not determined by law. And I think that would be a very niche case to come up, but just in sort of instances.
okay, I think I understand.
Okay.
And as you had said before, I know it's been a while since we sort of talked about this, this article in general, just kind of up from 5 to 13 in a general sense. Just, and not necessarily about the language itself, but sort of on a practical application of the language. So, one of the things that we've tried to articulate before is that there's this sort of unusual relationship in that when, our employees are concerned that they're being discriminated against, they have other avenues besides the grievance process for seeking redress or seeking, a solution to that. And normally the methods of resolution outside the contract are typically a little more robust than those inside. So is there, and maybe there's no official position on behalf of JU, and that's fine too. Is there an official, like, practical position that primarily you would want them to use those systems, or primarily you would rather they use the grievance process, or you're not making a statement one way or another? Because the methods for solving the discrimination complaint are pretty vastly different, whether it would be through the grievance process or through one of the other external avenues.
Obviously, both avenues exist for a reason. We think that, they're the existing avenues that they have beyond the grievance process, those are probably going to be a lot more friendly to people facing these things. If you're facing this sort of stuff, the grievance process is not a friendly thing to go through when you're facing something as serious as this.
Right.
And so we believe and maybe you guys disagree with me, but this is, based off that question. I believe at least that, that process that the University of Florida has should govern in most of those cases, and the grievance process, it really should only happen when there is those direct conflicts between regulation and the contract. It's an additional protection. And so they can say, this goes against the contract, but doesn't go against UF regulations, kind of the sort of gray areas, we have those extra protections for those GAs, and they might only have the grievance process available. We want to make sure that's available as sort of a backup in case they need to use it, but for 99% of these cases, we wouldn't want them to have to go through the grievance process unless they really had to.
Also, if I can add, I think having the definitions in, and what we didn't do that I'm realizing now is we didn't cite the regulations.
Yeah.
But like, having the definition of discrimination here is for accessibility and clarification for GAs who are looking for help, right? So if they go to HR website, there might be information there, but if they go to their contract, it would be really helpful to have something there that they can see and understand.
I understand what you're saying, and I just think, except for the fact that they're different. So I'm not sure it's gonna provide clarification, I think, and that's why I asked my question about the processes, because the language will be different, which is why I think if you think about it like concentric circles, there's gonna be an agreement between the two that an individual, based on your proposal, there's gonna be agreement and similarity between the two in such that in a given allegation or a given situation, somebody could choose whether or not to do one or the other. But there are gonna be other situations, depending on which discrimination definition you would use or the class list that you use, that they would only have access to the grievance process, which I think is a different way of saying kind of what Austin was just saying before. Okay, thank you. I don't know, Tom, did you have any questions, or Shane or Robert or Judy, do you have any questions? Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll stop sharing, let me fix how I'm sharing my screen here to make it. So I don't make that mistake again here. All right, next one we have is Article 10.
Okay.
And just so happen to be slightly above the one page that we have. So Article 10, it's something we've obviously talked a lot about. It's something that the University of Florida has not modified the proposal on since September. We're not interested in bargaining against ourselves week after week, so this is the same proposal we brought you a couple weeks ago. There are no changes to it. We believe and know that this is a fair agreement for what GAs deserve. It is a minimum stipend that is matched to the F1 visa and scales with the F1 visa. The requirements required by that, it extends fee relief to include all fees, so GAs aren't stuck paying $1,500 in fees in a given year. And it adds protections against, or adds protections in 10.6 to ensure that discretionary salaries are to what we intend that waiver to be, as opposed to being used unilaterally without consent. So there are no changes to that as it stands.
Did you guys happen to calculate this one? Did you do a cost analysis of this?
We did a rough cost analysis based off the latest.
Do you believe that the value of this proposal is equal to, greater than, or less than the proposal you gave us 2 proposals ago that didn't include the fee relief?
Less.
1.5%.
Less.
You think it's less?
We believe it's less. We've lowered the minimum stipend as by more than we calculate the fee relief to be equivalent to for all GAs a year, and all fee relief would apply to all GAs, as well as the minimum stipend raise would affect GAs on a scaling basis. So from our calculation, this is less.
Okay.
You guys have anything else to add for everyone?
No.
Do you have any questions or comments? Okay. We will move on then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
This looks awful clean.
Yeah, use your version and my version, and I went back through them and tried to, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. There really aren't a lot of things that we're substantively different on.
Okay.
You guys continue to add the parties at the beginning, and I continue to edit it to
Okay.
University of Florida and UFFGAU to align with other things.
Okay.
I don't think that really matters, that's
Yeah,
just why
I
that's
don't think
there.
I don't think that's a huge thing.
No. In 4.1D, everything that's in black, we've agreed to,
Okay.
more or less. I've tried to clean this up as best as possible.
Yeah.
You all have agreed to saying the like negative sort of connotation. As in, I'll read it to you, the letter of offer shall not be interpreted as, nor written in a way that could reasonably interpret it as guaranteeing specific multi-year contracts. And the last time we brought you this kind of more positive reframing, which is in section 1, you all struck it out when you brought it back. We think this is very helpful for clarifying that kind of negative phrasing that's in D.
Okay.
And we don't think that it's necessarily substantively different. It is giving clarification, but that's kind of the purpose of that statement. And we'd like you to just like take a look at it and really consider,
Sure.
like, we have agreed to the same point and we're
Yeah.
just trying to give a more positive framing of this.
Yeah, I think, I appreciate that, Hannah. I think one of the things that we're gonna kind of struggle with is that, the line numbers are gone, but, if you look in the first green line under 4.1D1, it might be difficult for us to contemplate in every single letter all of the ways in which this could occur. Like, I think that's one of the things that we're
Okay.
struggling. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's almost an infinite set, right?
Yeah, so the next part of that, right, is as per Article 4.7. So really what I was imagining, like, when we've talked about this, what we're imagining are those three, where are they? I guess it's 5. These 5 enumerations, 4.7, right? If you look at this like yellow highlighted sentence, which is like the sentence, right underneath that,
Down,
right?
down here, down this
Yeah,
one?
continue,
Okay.
number 1 is continued failure to perform duties.
Yeah, yeah,
And then on the full back of the second page, failure for academic judgment, incompetence or misconduct, lack of funds, or voluntary resignation. Like, that's kind of all we're imagining are those. A list of 5 things.
so in every letter of offer, you wanted to contain that language. Okay, I'll see what you're asking for there.
Are there any other questions that you have about that section there?
I mean, I guess just the thing about that is, I mean, I guess why that specific provision and not any of the other contract provisions have to be specifically not even included by reference, but word for word copied and pasted into the letter? Like, why that provision and not so many of the others, I guess, would be our question.
I mean, so if we're basically saying, right, the letter shall not be interpreted as or written in a way that would guarantee people, for example, 4 or 5 or 6 years of funding. We want it to be very clear that their contract, what they're signing, right, is for 1 year.
Mhm.
And that there are all of these ways that the university can end this contract in addition to the fact that it's just 1 year.
Right, and I guess what I'm saying is that why not rather than just making that explicit statement. It's not just that statement is not sufficient. It needs to be the full contract provision that lists them all and enumerates them individually, rather than just a succinct statement that says, you know, warning, 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 this is only good, like, you see what I'm saying, something that's a little more succinct, I guess, that's the,
I mean.
is there daylight between those two, or it's absolutely not, we want the entire 4.7 printed in the letter?
I mean, this is what we were imagining, but a succinct statement on 1 year of guaranteed funding or whatever you wanna say,
Okay.
like, I think we'd be absolutely open to looking at
Okay.
that sort of language.
Okay.
We just wanna make sure GAs know what they're being offered, and make sure that they're not unsure of what their place is, right?
Yeah.
We wanna make sure they can understand that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You all have provided some pretty specific examples, and you've even shown them to us of where you felt like the language was very mealy mouthed. It said one thing in paragraph 1 and something quite different in paragraph 4, and you're like, okay, so how do these two things sort of intersect? When you all being us, are gonna look at the, you know, the very straightforward statement that just says, no appointment can be more than 12 months. Like, how do those three things enter? I think you've made that point fairly consistently. I think you've done a good job articulating it. So I think the request for clarity, I think, is very reasonable.
Okay, yeah, we're absolutely welcome to look at anything you wanna bring back that you
Okay.
think would be more suitable.
Okay.
But we also, like, in addition to it being clear to GAs, right? If this is gonna go to the departments, cause they write all the letters, right? And we just say it can't be written as guaranteeing, that's also gonna be confusing for them potentially as well. So having some
I'm
sort
sorry,
of like,
say it again. I didn't.
it's
pick up
that
on
same like negative phrasing, right? So the negative phrasing could be confusing for GAs, but it's also gonna be confusing for departments who
Oh,
are
yeah.
trying to like follow this guideline.
Okay, understood.
Okay. 4.2. As long as we're okay to move on.
Yeah, go ahead.
Again, everything in black has been agreed upon.
Okay.
The first change you'll see is in section D, number 6, which, these are all the things that should go into appointment and reappointment letters.
Mhm.
You all crossed this out, I'm pretty sure because you weren't clear on what we meant by it.
Yeah, we had a conversation about this.
So I tried to rephrase it in a way that would be more clear.
Right.
I think it's important to have it, like, we collectively think it's important to have in. And again, it's simply stating if an appointment detail, so for example, a TA who's working a 1 semester class, like, it just needs to be clear that those start and end dates are not the exact same as the start and end dates of the entire appointment period, which should be 9 or 12 months most of the time. The next change is number 12.
Mhm.
And I added this, if you look a little bit further into section C, you'll see 2 sentences that were struck out.
Mhm.
That highlighted sentence that says, when appointed, employees shall be provided with criteria concerning reappointment.
Mhm.
That's why I moved it to number 12. That's like what I'm effectively trying to do. You struck it out, I believe, last time, or no, that was the next sentence. We had a whole conversation about it being in a confusing place, and I
Right.
thought putting it into the list of things that go into appointments and reappointment letters would be helpful. So I've simply moved it, is
Gotcha.
at least my intention.
Okay.
And then in that section C, the sentence following there where it says all letters of appointment shall be sent to appointees as soon as practicable, I believe that's the sentence we had a conversation about where you said, how does that square with section D? And so we just removed it.
I'm sorry, where was the reference again? I don't know.
So if you're looking at the highlighted sentence,
Yeah.
which is clear to see, the
Mhm.
sentence immediately after that, which is
Oh,
crossed
got
out,
it. Yeah, I'm with you.
we just crossed that out.
Okay,
Cause we had a conversation about it and we
Yeah.
agree with you that it doesn't really need to be there.
yeah, because we've got explicit deadlines that we have to meet in D,
Right.
in the numbers under D.
So we just got rid of it.
Okay, fair enough.
If you keep going. Section 4.5, again, is a rephrasing of that very confusing provision in the existing contract.
Mhm.
Where it says something like GAU can request like guidelines for teaching, and it doesn't really make any sense. We've brought this language to you in the past, I think you might have crossed it out. We think it would be helpful in cases of grievances.
So you're talking about current 4.3? Upon written request, UFFJU shall be provided written information regarding established guidelines for teaching assistant appointments.
Yeah.
Okay,
Which doesn't really make a lot of sense.
it's kind of weird.
It's kind of
It's not a
weird.
well-written statement.
So this is an attempt to kind of make it more usable, more realistic. This new 4.5, which says upon written request, UFFGAU shall be provided with written information regarding appointment details for a GA, which has requested support from us on any grounds. So we're imagining someone comes to us with a grievance, and we can ask for their appointment details as in like, what are they doing? If they're an RA, what's their position? If they're a TA, what's the course they're working on? Which is information they should have, but we just wanna, again, make that practicable.
Okay.
Um,
So, I mean, and I think, we kind of talked about this a little bit, so if, let's say that there was a sufficiently written, and I'll say that advisedly, a sufficiently written letter of appointment that outlined that, that would probably be sufficient. However, if in a case where the letter of appointment was insufficient, meaning it didn't provide the details that are sort of laid out in, was it 4.2B?
Yep.
Or it had something very vague, like, you're gonna report to the lab, not that that would put that, but if they just said,
Yeah.
like, that would probably not be specific enough for anyone to have a reasonable expectation of understanding what they're doing. Okay,
Exactly.
all right,
And in most cases, this, I know you're always concerned about like having to produce or like create something.
yeah,
If that letter is sufficient, they could just give us the letter that already exists.
right, but if it wasn't, it would probably, again, we wouldn't know, it would depend on the individual case, but probably if there was additional clarification, at some point, that would either be in an email or something to the individual employee, like, it's not gonna be enough for them just to know, hey, show up to the lab, like,
Mhm.
not that, hopefully, we wouldn't write a letter of appointment that's that vague, but if we were to, at some point, there's gonna have to be additional clarification of expectations given to the employee.
Mhm.
Okay, I got it, that makes sense, Steve, what do you think, Tom?
Yeah, it's good, it's interesting, because I know it's definitely clearer than what's in the current language. How is that, and I guess we're gonna get to workload, I might wait till we get to workload, to ask the question,
Yeah,
how
why don't
that's
we wait?
related to
Yeah.
the request for clarification that's in workload. Is this more just a general job description, it's not
Yeah.
individualized to the employee?
Cause I see seven's on their list of what they're bringing,
Okay,
so
I'll wait.
why don't we wait, that's a really good point, why don't we see it in context?
Okay, just make sure they're consistent.
Yeah.
When we get there, okay.
Okay. The next thing that is different from the way that you had it is
Mhm.
that I have re-put like the sentence that says no appointment shall create any right, interest, or expectancy of continued appointment, which you all have very much stressed that you want in the contract, and we have conceded to keeping it, and all of that that happened before is over.
Mhm.
I just put it within like one provision, which after that explains how, in addition to that, the university can curtail, diminish, or terminate an appointment with anything else. It just makes sense to have it all together, as in like one section that says the university can end your contract and like you have no expectancy of continued employment, altogether. And if you really need it as a pull-out sentence, I think we just would like some extra clarity as to why it's any different from the subsequent language. Obviously, we're talking about non-renewal, and separately, we're talking about curtail, diminish, and terminate, which can happen within a contract period.
That's exactly it, you just nailed it.
So, but, yeah. Those are just two separate things that kind of all go together with ending employment, though.
No, they do, but I think I mean, you just kind of explained why I think we wanted them separated, is because one has to deal with the appointment is completely fulfilled, you're at the end of the appointment is not started again. The other one is during that period of appointment, we have the ability to curtail, diminish, or end it.
Okay.
So I think that's, because the one doesn't really, they're similar in the final effect and final impact,
Yeah.
but in terms of the timing of when they occur, they are pretty substantially different from our perspective. I don't think it changes the meaning necessarily, but I do think that they are distinct and from our perspective.
Okay, we might go back and make that slightly clearer then.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay, the last thing, this is a, strikeout of language you brought the last time in
Okay.
section 4.8. You were attempting to clarify this.
Yeah,
But we think you have fundamentally kind of changed the meaning of it by adding that clarification.
Okay,
And so in a similar attempt to clarify, since you were confused, instead of adding language, we have just broken that second section into an A. Because by adding the clarification that you did, what it makes it sound like is that 9-month employees cannot be appointed in the summer within their department or doing a similar type of assignment as before.
well, no, I think that's one of our explicit interests.
That a department can't employ,
Well, then they should turn them in, I think what our discussion has been, that they need to turn them into a 12-month employee.
But the problem with that is that a lot of departments don't determine how much funding they have for summer TAs until closer to the end of that time. I know my department, we're still figuring out how many funding lines we have for summer TAs. So they wouldn't have an expectation 12 months in advance if they would
Yeah.
have those summer lines.
I can
Which
give
way-
you a very specific example in my own personal experience if you would like it.
Yeah, I actually, I don't think we're saying, I think we're actually saying the same thing, I think we're saying it differently. I think we agree in principle on our purpose was we wanted people to be able to. We were trying to reduce the number of restrictions
Right.
to allow 9-month TAs to be able to work over the summer. We were trying to facilitate that being possible. That, I mean, in a general sense, that's what we're trying to do. We want to eliminate the restrictions or reduce the restrictions on, if there's an opportunity that a department has for a 9-month TA to be able to work over the summertime,
Right.
we want to, respecting the other conditions of the contract, we want to try to facilitate that to happen.
Correct.
Yeah,
Can I ask a question? So
Yeah.
a lot of the summer appointments are for summer A or B, not for
Mhm.
summer C. Would
Mhm.
that make them a summer, like a 12-month appointment?
I
No.
don't think so.
So you wouldn't be able to be a summer A TA
And be a
for your department and, right?
If you were 12 months,
If you're 9 months.
if you're 9 months, yeah, why couldn't you, if you were 9 months, why couldn't you just do something right?
It gets, this might be, Judy, it gets, that's where that table gets really complicated,
Yeah,
like
it's
if you're
swirly.
employed for summer A, but you're taking a class for a waiver, summer C. Does this include waivers, or is this if you
Well-
add this employment?
Well, keep in mind, that was, the department would have to make that decision when they actually make the
If
offer.
they've got, yeah,
They have to say, look, I'm gonna offer you the summer position, it's going to have a waiver, or we're gonna offer you the summer position, and it doesn't.
That's in the cases where you're working outside your department or substantively different.
right,
Yes, and so that's now section A, but when you
Oh.
added this extra part, the overarching sentiment now, I can read it to you if it would be helpful. Let me read it with this crossed out
Okay.
section within it. It says continuing 9-month employees with assignments during successive academic years who are receiving summer term appointments that are either substantively different from their 9-month appointment and or assignment, who are appointed in a different unit, may be appointed for the duration of the intervening summer term,
right.
provided that the employee continues to maintain satisfactory.
Right, so we read that as 9-month employees that are set up for the next fall as a continuing employee. They can only receive this summer funding if they are doing something that is substantially different or if they're working in a different unit. That's how that sentence reads.
Right,
Cause
And
it's before the May.
Yeah, so this is clarification saying
right.
you can get summer funding, and if you're in a different unit or doing something very different, then it's up to the hiring unit to see if they're offering that tuition waiver.
Right, and I think that is as it was intended. I don't think this is intended for someone who's got, let's say you got an RA, you're working in a lab, your 9-month contract, and you just decide, hey, or your lab manager, your PI decides, hey, we want to just continue this through summer. I don't think it's designed for that. It's like, oh, we've got a teaching assignment over here, or another department wants to hire me over here. I think that was a proposal which still expands it from what it was, which was really narrow cases where if you're a teaching assistant, there's not a teaching assignment available, or I forget whichever one. So I think that was the intent. So I mean, and I'm
Yeah.
hearing a counter that basically says, included basically anybody who is a TA for 9 months, even if they're just continuing what they would normally do, and switch to a 12-month.
Yeah, so crossed out is language you brought in the last proposal.
Right,
Right,
to
And
try to
so-
clarify, yeah.
Yeah, And so we think by you trying to clarify it, it's actually made it more confusing, at least in
Okay.
our part.
Okay.
And so all I did was I removed that additional language and I went back to what we had already agreed upon. And I simply broke out the section where it talks about
Yeah.
9-month employees who are in a different unit.
Cause that's the whole, I think that section A is the whole thing. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's what it was intended. It wasn't intended to open it up for anybody just to continue what they've been doing in the same appointment, and convert from 9 to 12.
Right,
But
but we already
that's-
have GAs across the university, that's what they do, they teach for 9 months, and then as funding comes available for TA, they could TA, even if it's the same course they're TAing over the summer, you know? They could TA over the summer. And get that funded, that's what a lot of firms do, right?
But do they do it on a semesterly appointment, or do they actually convert to a 12-month? Because this was a lot of
That's what I don't
conversation.
know. I'm kind of
This is-
looking at the screen, hoping we'll get.
They just get a
Robert or
semesterly
Judy.
appointment just for
Yeah.
the summer.
Yeah,
Yeah,
All right, let's go back and talk about that.
yeah,
Let's have-
yeah,
let's have an
yeah. I
ongoing
see what you're
conversation.
saying, yeah, 'cause
That's the reality of what's been happening
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I think that this is a change to the contract that I think that we have a lot of shared interest in.
Yeah,
Because there
yeah.
are, like I said, the departments have come to us and said, we wanna be able to, if we have opportunity, we wanna be able to hire, we feel like the contract is preventing us from being able to hire GAs over the summer.
yeah, and that's,
So, in a grand sense, I mean, I do think that this is something that we both have a very clear shared interest in. We just wanna make sure we do it the right way.
Yeah.
And going back to a conversation where I know, and like, I never wanna put words in your mouth, but I know back then Jacob had raised a concern about making sure we did it right so that it wasn't seen as a tool by which we could take otherwise 12-month GAs and convert them
Yes.
to 9-month GAs and deny them the waiver over the summer,
Right.
which is something we had a lot of conversation about following that session, because we heard that loud and clear too. So, yeah, I think we're close. We just want to make sure we clearly do this the right way to create the most opportunities possible,
yeah,
you know, in the confines of what I think we're all expecting. So I think
right.
I think we can get this. I think we.
Because when you said that that's currently happening, I thought back to when I was in my old role, and I assumed you couldn't do that. So I'm like, yeah, sorry, you're 9, we can't just make you a 12 to continue what you're doing. But if that's common practice,
Well, it's the SWIP swapping I know that Judy has said.
yeah, that's
I,
what, right.
yeah, I think originally, before I started bargaining, this article was to help graduate students continue to make progress in summers and not have to go home and pick up odd jobs or wherever but to be able to work. And at that time, it was for continuing 9-month employees to be able to get kind of picked up within their unit to kind of get a stipend and conduct, let me say, their own research, in quote, right? But that was very troublesome for, like Patrick said, for some departments, because they were taking some of the 9-month employees, specifically biology, and then those students would go work and gain research experience over at at the Whitney lab and such. And so that's why this language, because they weren't appointing the students properly. And so we wanted to make sure that the students were appointed properly. And so this newer language that was refined came from that for 9-month continuing employees. It really wasn't for a 9-month, let's say, TA, that there was nothing for them to teach in the summer, but then all of a sudden there was, because we already had the summer hire file for that kind of classification of students. So that is kind of the history of how this has evolved. I definitely think it can be refined, but it was for those special kind of 9-monthers that will have another continuing appointment in the fall that will go outside, whether they're working at the Whitney lab or the museum, or to gain these other experiences, but not be obligated to have to register for the 6 credits required to hold the appointment. In a nutshell.
Can I just give you an example from my department, because this is how I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
So like, I'm a 9-month GA, I've been a 9-month GA the whole time. I've never received summer funding so far. My department doesn't have any 12-month GAs, we are
Okay.
all 9
9
months.
months, okay.
And so, as Austin was saying earlier, my department gets classes over the summer that GAs can either teach or they can TA for. Okay, and so that doesn't happen until the middle of spring.
Right,
Like all of that kind of happens right as the spring semester is kind of starting.
sure,
And so some TAs who are 9 months in my department get picked up for A or B and very rarely C. C usually goes to the faculty members and they might get a TA,
Okay,
often not. There are very rare TA shifts in the summer. It's mostly GAs who are teaching.
right, and
And so-
that makes sense, I'm just looking at the original 4.9. Right, if you're a teaching assistant 1 year and you're gonna continue as a teaching assistant the next year, and there's something available to
Yeah.
teach in the summer, you can do that, okay.
And so when you added this language, it makes it from continuing 9-month employees who have contracts in successive years may be appointed for the duration of the interim summer. And you now add in that language where it says they need to be substantively different or outside the department. It would make it so that, at least it seems like that I couldn't teach in summer
you'd now be
B.
prohibited.
Because I would have to go outside my department or do something substantively different than what I'm already doing.
I got
Okay,
I
so
see, yeah.
Yeah, and we actually could probably go back to original language on the first sentence in 4.9,
Yeah,
which says continue summer RA appointment, although it's RA appointment, I don't know. But I'm gonna.
that's a, yeah, that, the label,
We
the
won't call it
label's a
RA
problem,
appointment, so
yeah.
the continuing employees who are on 9-month contracts with assignments as teaching assistants during successive academic years may also be appointed as teaching assistants in the intervening summer terms. We could leave that alone.
That could be 4.9
And
A,
then say,
and that could be 4.9
yeah,
B.
but here's another category that's not just for Whitney Lab, but it's for what you have in purple there, or what is striked out in red, one or the other.
Yeah, so that's all I was attempting
We
to
can work
do
on
by
that.
breaking it out is exactly what you were just saying, right?
Yeah,
It's two
I see what you're
different
saying,
things
we
we're
don't, we
talking
wanna
about.
retain that first part,
Yeah.
of the continuing.
Yeah, I
that
think,
makes sense.
I appreciate that. I think we can sort of whip this into shape when we come back with it, hopefully in a way that I think meets everybody, what everybody wants on this one.
Okay.
Sure.
And that's it for 4.
Yeah, I think, does anybody else, do you have any other questions about this? I mean, I know this has been this one's been
Mm-hmm.
this one's been a bit of a beast, but I feel like we're about as close as we've come to having it all worked out, and, I will also say for what it's worth on the implementation and practical side, I mean, we're gonna do our dead level best once we get this one done, obviously, when we get the contract ratified, that, we're gonna do significant amount of proactive, organizational development and training so that we can really try to put our best foot forward to getting everybody all the up-to-date information. Because I know that in the past, that's been a concern. I know that you all have provided multiple examples where there are departments that are either inconsistent or not necessarily issuing the letters in a timely fashion or whatever. So, this will be a great opportunity for us to sort of reset maybe and go over, look, this is how this is gonna work. These are the timelines, these are the deadlines, and let's do some training. So appreciate the work you did on this one. I know, like I said, I know this one's been a lot of proposals on our before, so I think we're in really good shape to be really close.
Yeah, I think we're almost there.
Yeah,
So we have Article 7 for you now.
okay.
Do you want me to talk through this one again?
Yeah, we're perfect.
Thanks.
We want to get the contract done. I think we're kind of all feeling that.
Yeah.
And so we're trying our best to be agreeable and make compromise.
Appreciate that.
And so this version of workload, we want to offer a significant concession and leave in the average part of the workload in 7.1. In recognizing that you all have added this extra language for international GAs and other GAs who cannot work in average.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have left that in there for 7.1. And, oh, you have an A there that I don't have on the printed version. That's really fine.
Where are we looking?
Sorry, I'm looking at the board and then looking down at the piece of
Yeah, the
paper.
line 9 on the paper.
Yeah, isn't
you
A
gave
up
us
there?
is
Yeah, the
different.
text should be, I don't know why I printed without the A, but
Okay,
Is it otherwise the same?
I believe
It
so.
should be.
Yeah, yeah, because they took this version, downloaded it, and then printed it, so I didn't change any tags. So it should be-
It's a little difficult too, because it looks like that's all in like review mode red, whereas this is all in black, so it's a little tough to figure out.
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm pretty sure the last time you brought this, it was all highlighted. And so I unhighlighted it,
Yeah.
so that's why it looks like things have been changed, but
Yeah, that was,
really,
yeah, I was trying to, just trying to show like CCL versus all the changes, what I was really trying to show.
yeah. So really, we have put back in that average.
Okay,
In the provision specifically regarding people who cannot work an average,
mhm,
I made one, or actually I made two small changes. I added in contracted hours. I don't think that really affects anything substantively. I just think it's clearer to read. Before said working more than the average hours,
Mm.
and so I added in contracted to clarify hours.
okay, and you're talking line 10,
Line 10,
okay,
yep.
alright,
And I also switched in that last section, I switched the word any to all. Which again, I don't think really substantively changes what you're saying, because you're saying any as in any of them.
Right.
And I'm saying all as in all of them.
I don't.
I just think it's
I don't-
clearer,
okay,
at
so
least to me.
I don't think there's a
It's good.
fundamentally substantive difference in those two. I think it applies the same one, I mean, I think it's the
Exactly.
same thing.
I just think all is clearer personally.
Yeah.
In 7.2, the main body of the text is the same. We're asking for 7.A to swap it, before it said for employees assigned to research. We would like that one to be for all GAs. So I just cut out that beginning about research. It started with employees may request to meet with their supervisors to talk through expectations.
Okay,
I don't think there's any reason why a TA shouldn't be able to meet with their advisor.
it's relatively implicit in the employee-employer relationship.
So I think specifying research assistants there is kind of weird, and so I just
Understood.
made it in place.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying, I don't think that's a huge deal killer necessarily.
I don't think so either. And so what we're kind of asking in exchange is to hopefully insert this definition of excess workload that you all brought. I'm pretty sure I even have it in there verbatim. I did my best. Which is specific to research assistants, because you guys have been very clear that you're worried about excess workload for teaching assistants. And our goal, as I think we've made pretty clear, is to get protections for as many GAs as possible. And so if you all are only able to extend this definition to research assistants, we would like to add it in, if at all possible.
Quick Zoom thing, someone, that is either Robert or Shane, just texted and said they're in the waiting room.
Yeah, I saw
Okay.
that she was waiting, I've added her,
Oh, cool.
there, yeah.
Okay, thank you, thanks, sorry.
Was looking at my phone, alright.
And everything else should be the same. I think I added a line between B and 7.3 and a line between 7.3 and 7.4, which is why it looks like there's an A and a
It shows you
7.3.
crossed out.
I just tried to give them a line.
I don't know, the one of us at some point in exchanging all these back and forth had the developer tool content control thing open and then saved everything. And I don't know which one of it was. Maybe it was me inadvertently, but I can't begin to explain how much more difficult it made this, because every single change has like a text box around it, and it's made it much more complicated. So no, I get it. That's fine. All right.
And
Well,
that's it. That's
Yeah, I
really,
mean, I think we can, I think we're, like I said about before, I mean, I think we're closer on this one than we've been in the, since really for the entire process. I appreciate the work you guys did on this one.
Okay. Moving right.
We may have questions. I know Shane just got here. This is one that I know that, I don't know if she had a chance to see it. Did you include them on the,
Yes, they should have all gotten the email, Michael wouldn't have gotten the email, but that's, I think,
okay.
do you want me to bring back up Article 7?
No, I'll just give me one second if you don't mind. Let me just text her really quickly. Thank you, sorry about that.
No problem.
All right, that's 7.
Right, so we're going on to Article 9 now.
Okay.
And this is another one where we're
Pretty close.
getting to the end here.
Yeah, we were feeling pretty good about this one last time. I think we've gotten, and this is again, someone we've put in a lot of, I think we've done some good work.
Yeah,
Overall on this one, and there's a lot of new language in here that I think we've already agreed to.
yeah, I think it's a massive improvement in clarity and protections for everyone, and the changes are really sort of simple. We've agreed to keeping your pointing to the regulations and the floor statutes.
Okay.
I think that's fine. And then we have removed the word ethical within that definition there. We know the word ethical is within the Europe regulations and things, which so points to a similar terminology, but we think this sort of balance of both provides us where we need to be.
Is that it?
Yeah, those are the two. That's it.
I mean, we're about as close as we're gonna get on that one too. We'll take a look at that one really close.
Okay.
Okay, great.
I just wanna say overarchingly, what we're trying to do is really extend a hand and show that we're willing to make some compromises. on
No, I
things.
appreciate that. No, I think, I think that message is received. Yeah, we've,
There's gonna be a couple articles, obviously, where we still have a lot to talk about, but
Sure.
especially on something like Article 13, where we're really far apart, we basically took out 90% of the additions we had made just to get down to what we think is the kind of the core importance.
no,
of it. So,
I think we recognize that. I think we recognize that. So, yeah, hopefully. Do you have more?
Yeah, I got two more.
Okay.
And both of these, I don't know if it's kind of worth sharing the screen, they're very simple.
Okay.
It's Article 20 and Article 19.
Okay.
20, we had TA, and we are simply asking to un-TA it to remove a single clause that we had put in the TA for Article 12. So it's just kind of housekeeping, and I can share my screen here, but,
So we need to look at which two together, Austin?
so Article 20, we're looking at, what was 20.7 towards the end.
Mm-hmm.
And that clause right there for the health coverage, we moved into Article 12 on health insurance.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I don't know if the language is 100% complete, but I believe it's pretty much verbatim. We just moved that over there. So we
Did we already,
have.
do you know, did we already put it in 12?
Yeah, with TA 12.
Okay,
yeah,
so we
yeah.
could just re-TA, we could just re-TA 20 without that. thing
Yeah,
being
that's
done.
it,
Okay.
yeah. We just didn't
Alright.
feel it was necessary to have
Yeah,
that.
I'll go ahead and check that, and if that's what it is, I'll just go ahead and resend it to you.
Okay, and then we have Article 19, which we've not brought before. It's something that it's not obviously a high priority for us, and it's just CCL, that's all it is. We kept it in case we thought there was some reason we needed it later on, but at the end of the day, we thought we want to get these things finished as soon as possible, so bring you CCL in the hopes that we can just get that TA
I'm just
off the
going,
list.
I'm just going back to check because I'm pretty sure. We had brought a version of this in January of 24.
Mhm.
Do you know if there's anything, I mean, it was literally like 13 months ago. Do you happen to know if there was anything different? Because I mean, I haven't looked at that one in so long, I can't remember if we had any changes.
Let me check my our notes here real quick.
I believe we submitted it to you as a CCL proposal, but it's been so long, I can't honestly remember.
Yeah, and you might have,
Is that can stay the same, the old date, right? So just if it's.
I mean, I'm not a fan of having the legacy provisions in there, but it doesn't change the meaning of 1907.
Right, and it still would have been
Yeah.
affected.
Yeah,
at
I
that
mean-
time. Okay.
I don't have any documents of
Okay,
when you guys did it. I also consider removing that point to 2018, 2019,
Yeah.
but I didn't know if that would make it more
It-
difficult. If you want to remove it, we're happy to have that removed. We just thought bringing something as clean CCL, we were happy with,
Yeah.
so.
yeah, and for what it's worth too, again, this is more on the practical side, I had a couple of meetings this week with one of our sort of data specialists in the classic cloud department about operationalizing this. And, obviously, that person is much more in tune with how to manage databases and pull queries and SQL and all that kind of stuff. So I am hopeful that as soon as we get the contract done, I'm hoping that as frequently as probably a monthly basis, we'll be able to get you guys just an operationalized download of all of this stuff, probably on like a monthly basis, because I know you need it for like multiple reasons.
Yeah,
The thing that we're working on is, rather than having like 3 different versions of it, we just want one like omnibus report
Mhm.
that includes everything that you want in any of the different ones, and then you can just get it and you'll always have whatever you kind of need.
Mhm.
So like right now, we're working on pulling, like what was the immediate previous salary and the current salary, and it wouldn't necessarily always matter, but you would hope, like, it would just be, so that way you're just getting one report, so. and it
that, I mean,
flows
that,
for-
that sounds fantastic. Yeah, we really appreciate having that.
That way you guys don't have to constantly ask. We could literally just send it to you on. a
You have it
monthly
ready to
basis.
go, yeah.
But once we get it closer, like I said, once we get this done and we know exactly what's gonna definitely be in it. I can give you all like a draft version and just verify that all the columns are all the columns you want, and then we can sort of save the query, operationalize it, and on the 15th or whatever time, every month, we could just give it to you.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic.
All right, good.
Can I quickly address Article 8?
Yeah, of course.
We just wanna say thank you for bringing it.
Okay,
You obviously added some language that's very helpful.
right.
And we're just trying to talk to some people before we bring it back.
Okay.
It's not, we're not ignoring it.
No, I get that.
And we do wanna recognize the effort that you put
Sure.
into adding those extra classes and everything.
No, yeah, I mean, I think, to the extent that, it was never our intent, although, and you pointed out, rightly so, it was never our intent to constrain it was clearly what we wrote in our proposal, that's what was written. It wasn't our intention in our proposal to constrain the access of bereavement to not include, other members of immediate family who wouldn't necessarily be contemplated in the paid leave. And that's clearly what we proposed to you, but that wasn't our intention. So
Okay.
trying to make that part right was definitely the purpose of our last proposal.
Yeah, and we appreciate that clarification, and when we asked GAs before, that's why they said they were against the regular
Sure.
sibling, and that's why we're taking our time to make
I get
sure
it.
that they agree with whatever, we do think that.
And they
increase the pay-
understand,
Yeah,
Yeah.
because we understand all the nuances of paid leave.
Mhm.
But someone who's looking at a definition of an extended family that doesn't have sibling, it seems much more clear than we know of all the nuances.
Sure, no, I get that. I appreciate it.
and that's all we have today, just those 7, so.
Okay, let me just kind of go through the list here real quick. So we've got 4, 9, 10. Okay, I mean, I think there's no reason why we won't be able to come back with, most of these, next week. Now, next week,
Which should be the 7th.
yeah, next week is the 7th. It's the week, the 2 weeks after that. So the 24th, we weren't gonna meet, but I'm now not gonna be available on the 14th. So if it's okay with you all, the 14th and the 21st will be off, and then we'll be back on the 28th. But we should have a number of proposals for you all in response to this next Friday for sure.
Okay, that sounds good.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks.
We're gonna Zoom, just hang out for just a minute with those.